Welcome, Kevin McCarthy, to Ordinary Visionaries. So glad to have you here on a topic that I find extraordinarily and importantly interesting. Really, something I've thought about and worked on a lot. So, tell me, Kevin, how are you an ordinary visionary?
Well, I'm a regular old guy who captured a vision about 35 years ago for the power of purpose and how it could have an influence on individuals and organizations. And that transformed my career in a way that I didn't necessarily anticipate. And so as a result, I just was probably on a fairly traditional path as a businessman, and this interruption came, and that's where I have lived since in that space.
So, tell me how you got interested in purpose in the first place.
Adversity.
What was that?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where I think, when you're younger, when you're in your teens, you're sort of trying to figure out what life's all about. When you're in your 20s, you're trying to figure out who you are. And then I basically, in my early 30s, I went through a business divorce I had a commercial real estate development business. And I was always sort of a student of self-help, if you will. When I was about 12 years old, my mother was reading the book, I'm Okay, You're Okay. And I picked it up from her. And that was probably the first book I read that was a sort of a self-help book, if you will.
I read that way back when.
And really had really got me sort of into the understanding of personal reflection at a young age, 12, 13 years of age.
Wow.
And so I've had this interest in this for a very long time. But one of the things I kept reading in the literature or hearing was at some point, once you know your purpose, then you can get on with it. And nobody could tell me how to find my purpose. And so as I went through a business adversity, because I'd kind of gotten onto the rut, if you will, the make money, get married, get the education, do all those sorts of things. And I had a business where we were a commercial real estate development company. I had a business partner who was 15 years my senior. We didn't know each other all that well. I hadn't done much due diligence. And about 2 years into the process, where we had numerous shopping centers under development, we had about, today's dollars, it would be about $80 million worth of projects underway.
Holy cow.
And he started to drink.
Oh my gosh.
He'd come back from lunch drunk, and he started doing really crazy stuff. And the day I met him, I told my wife, today I met a man who's either a genius or a madman. And I was right. He was both. And so his ethics just really spun out of control. And I went to our financial partners and said, we have a problem. And they said, no, you have a problem because you're the junior guy here. You may be 50-50 partners with him, but he's the guy that knows what's going on, and you're coming along. So we're going to go with the old guy. And I said, fine, if you're going to go with him, then here's my equity, here's my job, here's everything, because I don't want anything to do with him at this point. So that brought me to a point where I was looking introspectively at okay, how did I get here? Because we create our own experiences. I'm a big believer in taking personal responsibility. And, what was my contribution to this? And I recognized that I was, it was a bit of a shortcut to trying to make a lot of money. It was, didn't do due diligence on the person, just, some of that's youthfulness, I think.
Yeah.
Some of that's optimism. You think the best of people.
Sure.
And as a result of that, what I now call tough shift experience, I started a real estate advisory business, which eventually grew into a general management consulting business where I was doing strategy work. And I was asked to speak for a group of real estate brokers for a residential and commercial franchise and on strategy. And so I developed a lot of the on-purpose philosophies at that point. One of the things I recognized, this is again 1988, 89, in that period time frame, is that purpose was something that was missing from strategy. Today we talk about it. That's 35 years ago.
Yeah.
Nobody was talking about it. They were barely talking about mission statements at that point. So it's the sort of thing where I just sort of dug into it, and I said, this is something novel and interesting and missing, and it's an important piece that's missing.
Right. Right.
Sort of the heart, the soul or the heart is missing from business.
Had you been reading any books that sort of helped develop these ideas, or worked with any particular people?
I didn't work with anybody that I can say. I mean, certainly a book that had an influence on me, a writer that had an influence in terms of how I wrote my book was Og Mondino, if you're familiar with his Greatest Salesman in the World, or The Christ Commission, or The 12th Angel, or I think it's called The 12th Angel, something like that. I mean, he's a wonderful journalist who was also a writer, who had great writing ability. My books are not necessarily great works of art. They've sold well, but I'm really trying. I generally have a process or a model, and I'm putting a story around a model, not necessarily attempting to be a great, F. Scott Fitzgerald or or anything like that. It's not one of the.
Yeah, well,
and my
it's
audience,
a rarity, isn't it?
Yeah, my audience is business people. They don't have time for a lot of the flowery stuff that maybe goes on in more fiction-based stuff, where I'm writing more nonfiction in a narrative environment.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me what was the essence of the work you did to help companies find their purpose, individual or business purpose? Were you working on both?
Well, initially I was doing it primarily for business people, but whenever I was preparing for that first speaking engagement that I did with regards to the strategy, I came up with a formula. Again, this is, like I said, 1988. The formula I came up with was the purpose of the person aligned with the purpose of the organization. I call that the on-purpose principle. And what that says is that the person has a purpose, the organization has a purpose. And and I also include within purpose, vision, mission, and values. But generally I talk purpose is the preeminent, if you will. So what I looked at in this equation was, in order for that to exist, which I think is where, if you want to call it, the purest energy is, then the person needs to know their purpose, vision, mission, and values, and they need to be, and they want to align with that. Much similarly, the organization needs to know its purpose, vision, mission, and values, and it needs to align with that. And so, when you have two healthy entities that are strategically aligned, then people who find one another, there's this natural sort of connection and affinity that occurs, and it's almost philosophically get out of their way if they're talented, where the corporate world that we live in today is a management structure rather than a leadership structure, and that management structure tends to crush people rather than uplift them. And so that's kind of that philosophy. And I'll tell you, it's, even though I've been at this for 35 years, I feel like at some level I've been extraordinarily unsuccessful, because, the corporate world is still a very challenging place for a lot of people that chews them up and spits them out. There are better companies today, and I think people are more aware than ever of the idea of wanting to be whole at work.
Yeah. I don't know if you know my direction, but I figured this out very early. Mm-hmm. And I've only had a couple jobs in my life. I've been self-employed since high school. So, and then not that I had all my purpose figured out early on, but I knew I didn't want to work for them.
It's funny. I actually call myself one of the original millennials, because, the millennials are sort of, they're looking for meaning and purpose in their lives. And I said, I preceded them by 30 years, I was the same way. I tried a couple jobs, And I just, I'm a natural entrepreneur anyway.
Right.
And working in a company, I just found it oppressing for me. And also, um, I'm not good at taking orders, so I'm not a good employee.
Okay. We're brothers from another mother. Taking orders? But I
Yeah,
have a better idea. Do what you're told.
I
Fuck
know.
you.
Right.
Yeah. So in working uh, with clients, with businesses, how did you help people uh, emerge with their purpose, get clear on their purpose? No, okay, that's our purpose. At which
Well,
point, if you've really done it right, there's kind of a shift, right?
there is. Actually, it's more of, I don't even know if they call it a shift. It's more of a click.
Yeah,
It's like the locks fall in place and all of a sudden doors open. There's almost an audible gasp at some point where it's like, oh my gosh. So the door opens up and there's a sort of a new freshness to it that's going on.
yeah,
The method that I used, interestingly, for companies, it's very complicated it's more complicated with companies than it is with individuals.
sure.
Obviously, because when you're dealing with one individual, they can make their own decisions. When you're dealing with multiple individuals and leaders, and you have different understandings of what purpose, vision, mission, and values are that they bring into it. So I'm trying to educate and get everybody onto the same language, if you will. That's a challenge in and of itself. But in doing that, what I basically do is I ask them, what do they want? And I just, interestingly, I have Post-it notes and I have them write lots of those things. What do they want? And then based on that, um, I could see where things would fall into purpose, vision, mission, and values. And I would I would teach them what purpose, vision, mission, and values are. And then I would have them resort all their stuff into areas. And then from there, we would begin to drill down into purpose, vision, mission, and values, as well as their plans. I'm doing strategic planning work for an organization. So that's one of the techniques I use. And to some extent, one of the challenges I found was that purpose was really difficult for them to articulate. Vision was pretty straightforward. Mission's what they do.
Yeah,
If they're a printer, they print. If they're a manufacturer, they manufacture. That was pretty straightforward, to be able to talk about what they do. And then their values are also an area of difficulty for most of them to pull out. At some level, I'm bookending the purpose and the values piece and helping them articulate those and more or less recording what the vision and the values are. Although, a lot of times I find, if I do a survey, I have survey tools that I'll use, and I'll survey people and say, what do you think about some of these things? And I'll often find that the larger the organization, the more diversion there is on the vision. And the larger the organization, often the more siloed people are. And so this is one of the interesting things I find happens as a sort of a common theme, if you will, in companies where I've done consulting. And that is that you have really good people who are really working hard to do right by the company. But because the right hand isn't talking to the left hand, they're arguing, each one thinking they're doing really right for the company. And that's a leadership issue where I have a conversation with either the business owner or the CEO or the leadership team and say, this is on you, not them. One of the philosophies I've always taken into my consulting is that the client is the company, not the individual. So I have actually written into my contracts that if you hire me, Mr. CEO or Miss CEO, I'm going to give you the best of what I see. I will not pull punches because I'm working for the company, almost like I'm a shareholder or a director who is charged with the stewardship of the well-being of the organization. And if you're part of the problem, Mr. or Miss CEO, I will call it out. Now, I'll call it out discreetly, but I will call it out. And if you're not prepared for that, then don't hire me. Pretty straightforward. I mean, most people look at it and they go, yeah, and frankly, if they don't want that, then I'm just as happy not to have them, because I've saved myself a lot of headaches of,
Right.
They've revealed themselves at that point.
Now, you've created an instrument, and we're going to talk about that a little later, that helps you find your purpose.
Your personal purpose, correct.
And it's sort of a forced choice. You have 2-word purpose statements, and then you look and say, well, which of those most reflects me, or what's important to me?
Which is most meaningful.
And then you click the one, and it gives you another one, and the ones that you didn't click on are eliminated, and then you're left with a fewer number, and then you go through them again until you get down to one purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you, which is pretty efficient, in 5 minutes, it's like, that's pretty interesting.
Right.
Now, so when you worked with the company before you had that instrument, did you have a sorting kind of thing, or just a million things you're trying to say, which is which?
Yeah, I mean, that tool took me 30 years to develop. It took 30 years to develop a tool that takes 3 minutes to do once you're accessing the tool. I mean, it almost takes more time to get to the tool. If you're using the retail product, we have a presenter version for larger audiences, but where it's a live event, where it's a lot more efficient getting in. But I mean, it's one of those things where I developed it by, it just, at first it was just me coaching, talking, pulling out, trying to sort it out, helping people. One of the things I found early on was people would say, well, I know my purpose. And I say, what is it? And they'd say, it's to make a difference. And I go, well, that's all of our purpose. I mean, so, let's get what's unique to you in terms of how you uniquely serve or how you uniquely make a difference. And so I would just do work with people, and it would take sometimes an hour or 2 hours to get them to that. The other part of it too is to get to the structure of a 2-word purpose statement. There's a generic beginning that is, I exist to serve by, and it's a little bit of a misdirection, not intended to be a misdirection, but it tends to point people in a direction that is where they are comfortable. And from that, I then reverse engineer them back to a larger understanding of their purpose. The 2-word instrument itself that you asked about is, I had developed lists of words, and I would have people go through and pick them out. There's the 2 words there's a gerund and an object. A gerund is for those that don't know, it's an English term or grammar term, which is basically, we can think of it as an active verb. So an example of a 2-word purpose statement is liberating greatness. So if you take liberating, I was liberating, I am liberating, I will be liberating. So it can be in our past, our present, and our future. And then the greatness is what I'm going to call a positive attribute that is unique to the person. So we put these combinations together, and so I had lists of words here and lists of words there, and I'd have people go through it, and it would take forever. And I'm a tennis player, so I was a competitive tennis player. So what I basically did is I started having them take their words, put them into a tennis tournament format, and then based on the tennis tournament, it would force them to advance the one that was most meaningful. In the On Purpose Person, my first book, there's actually a what I call a want list and tournament process, where the character, the man is his name, is writing down all the things he wants in various areas of his life, and then he's putting them into a tennis tournament. And then from that, he identifies it's both goal setting and values clarification exercise. So I kind of use that same tool for the purpose piece, but having worked with so many thousands of people over several decades, I developed a simplified version of that, and then invested a lot of money to automate it. And
Imagine.
yeah, I mean, it was just and to be able to make it a shopping cart and do all the things. If you've done any technology to create something that works well, it's
I have.
it's trouble.
Yeah. So let's back up a little bit to purpose itself. I
Mhm.
mean, what, why? I mean, it's like you're not telling people you should have this purpose. You're saying you should discover the purpose that's already there inside you, the way you orient your life, but you're not aware of it.
Mhm.
When you come to the final thing, by the way, mine was bringing light,
Oh, okay,
which
interesting.
is, uh, that was the one I came up with. Now, if I've been wondering the last couple of days, well, if I did it again, would I come up with the same one? But that's sort of not here nor there at the moment. But
Well,
bringing light,
we can talk about that. I mean, if you want, I mean,
yeah,
it's
we'll get to that a bit later. But so bringing light, and I thought, yeah, I am trying to bring light to things. I'm helping clarify things.
Mhm.
I'm helping people empower people to be their best, things like that. I mean, it's all related to that idea.
Right.
This is something I'll probably run through ChatGPT, by the way.
That's fine.
I discovered my purpose was bringing light. What does that mean? And it'll say some great things.
Interesting.
Yeah. Um, anyway, um, so back to the importance of that. So if I get that, if I am, it seems that I could say, okay, well, how do I bring light to this? That's my purpose. So am I bringing light to this, or am I just trying to succeed? Because obviously we have conflicting parts in ourselves.
Right.
Some that are expansive and some that are contractive,
Hmm.
you know. And hopefully our purpose is not contractive. I don't think you have any contractive purposes. My
No,
purpose is to screw people over. No, not
no,
that.
no. Yeah. No, that would be a values issue anyway.
Yeah. So what did you discover when you helped people find their purpose and it sort of went click for them? Yeah, that's what I'm about. And then what's the further work you did with the company to help live that purpose in the company?
Well, yeah, you sort of mixed the equation there. Let me just go to the
Okay,
individual side first.
sure.
When somebody finds their purpose, and by the way, bringing light. One of the first with the tool, you'll also get a series of emails, and the first email is to say pull out a dictionary and thesaurus. I could probably add or Chat GPT these days or AI.
Yeah.
But pull it out and look at the word bringing and look at the word light and see if there are better fitting words. So it is designed to get people from, I don't have a clue, to really 80% or more there. Statistically, when we have a way of assessing, how accurate that is, both in live events as well as within our existing database, we find that 80% of the people will rate their two-word purpose statement an 8 out of 10 or higher.
Okay.
Um, and 50% will actually give it a 10 or higher. They'll say, this is a 12. This is me. Okay.
Perfect. Yeah.
So, at some level, what it does is, let's just talk now that you have your two-word purpose statement. What do you do with it? So that's the on purpose part, because prior to that, if you don't know your purpose, you're sort of a wandering generality. Now you have a chance to be a meaningful specific. And really that's the hard work, the alignment piece, because now it may be negotiating some relationships that maybe aren't working well. That could be a job. That could be hopefully not a marriage. But there's renegotiation doesn't necessarily mean a divorce, okay, or a bad thing. It just means a realignment. Um, It could be how you're spending your money. It could be how you're eating. It could be any number of different things that are involved because it's a whole life concept. And as a
Yeah.
result, people then, we tend to, using that want list internment process, they have identified what do they want. And now whenever you infuse purpose into it, it tends to give them innate motivation, as opposed to an external force like, I need to lose weight, my daughter is getting married, therefore I want to look good in my wedding, in my dress when my husband walks me down the aisle. Well, there's the other side of it, which is I want to innately be there, healthy, therefore I'm going to bring light in my weight, lighten my load, so to speak. And that's another way of looking at it. So what
Yeah.
happens is everybody interprets it differently. People always say to me, tell me, what does my purpose statement mean? I go, I'm not going to tell you that because I don't know what it means, because it means something to you different than somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and so, I'm really cautious about not sort of trying to tell them how to live their life. It's not my job.
Right. Right.
Uh, it's their job to ask questions. Now, one of the things we do, or I do, is once a month, for people that have used the tool, I have a free Refine Your Purpose event online where people come in and we talk about their 2-word purpose statement. So if it's not working for them, or they feel uncomfortable, or they're trying to figure out what to do with it, I do one-on-one coaching live in front of an audience. And normally we have 6 to 10 or 12 people that show up. It's not overwhelmingly large, so I can do more individual work. And some people just show up again and again just to hear something different, or a different perspective as we're talking about things.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Because not everyone's the same. People have different levels of clarity. They're in different places in their life and their philosophy and whatever. And some people might really struggle. Some people, it might be a big opening more quickly.
Yeah.
So,
now,
yeah.
One of the things that's unique about the 2-word purpose statement, and this is where, when I said the I exist to serve by, why it's a little bit misleading, is because there are actually three levels of a purpose statement, if you will. Most people are going to go to the external. I exist to serve other people. So they're going to talk about, how am I bringing light to other people?
Yeah.
But purpose for me is it's like mind, body, spirit. It lives in the spirit side. And so as a result, regardless of where one's perspective is, unless they are a tried and true atheist, if they want to call it higher power, the force, Mother Earth, God, Jesus, Muhammad, but they have a sense of a higher power. So I look at it and say, first of all, it's between you and your higher power. And that higher power is attempting to instill this with and in you. And then 2, are you willing to receive it? And then 3, in turn, you want to give it. So it's not unusual that, we're of an age where we're mature in our experiences and we've gone through a lot of life. If you're talking to somebody who's younger, a lot of times their 2-word purpose statement is what they are most struggling with. As we get to the other side of that, it's what we most want other people to have, kind of like Alcoholics Anonymous. The alcoholic who turns into a sober person who most wants to help other alcoholics become sober. So
Right.
It's kind of this double-edged sword where, it's sort of the universe is pouring into us and we want to pour that out. So it's a co-creative process is the way I describe it. And if you take the spiritual dimension out, which is what a lot of purpose people do these days, is they take the spiritual, the spirit part out of it, and then you're left with sort of a mental exercise, which is really the vision or the mission, or you're left with a mechanical process that's out there. I think one of the unique things that I really attempt to bring into people's lives is to get in touch with what I call their heart. The purpose is symbolized by the heart. It's where we live. It's where our identity is, in that sense. Point to yourself, and most people do this. So that's the way that I understand it and communicate it to people.
It's very powerful.
Yeah.
Really interesting. So, yeah, that gives me a better perspective of it because it's not like you take a name tag and put bringer of light.
Boy, you know what though? It's interesting. I mean, okay, how would you describe yourself? I mean, to somebody that says, "What do you do?" Or "What do you love to do?" Maybe that's a better way to describe it. What do you love to do? So, you want to answer it?
Yeah, I love having deep conversations with people.
Hmm.
And and I had deep conversations with people as my clients, just trying
Right.
trying to help them figure out what their business was, how they could get out there, all that stuff. That was what I sort of fell into.
Hmm.
But now I'm interviewing all these people, and it's just it's amazing, and it's so interesting, and I'm happy to share these perspectives with as many people as I can, because I think every one of these interviews gives a great insight into a particular area. Some will
Hmm.
be interested, some won't. And I want, I've said that the purpose of Ordinary Visionaries is to inspire people to live as an ordinary visionary.
Yeah.
Own your ordinary visionary-ness. It's like I have ideas, I have visions, I take action to make a difference.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
Well,
And that
see,
can be a million different ways.
right. So, just in this brief time that you were chatting with me, I'm making notes. I'm doing things. So, what you might look at in terms of you've got your purpose of bringing light. Your vision might be that you are what I call an inner viewer. Not, or an interviewer is one thing. That's a specific type of job, but an interviewer is kind of a way where you're looking inside of people, and you're asking them to look inside,
Yeah.
and so that becomes sort of a vision of what you're doing. And then the missions would be you're doing this podcast. Well, I guess podcast, I don't know what you call it. I mean, the series. You've done
Yeah.
your consulting. These are expressions of your purpose through a vision. And so a lot of times I find, it's maybe a trite example, but I have, a person that comes up, maybe it's a woman that says my purpose statement's inspiring hope. And I've always been a cheerleader. I was a cheerleader in high school. I was a cheerleader in college. And I love to encourage and cheer people on. And so they have a vision of themselves as sort of a cheerleader.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, that's, it's great because it makes now all of a sudden they have this vision, but now there's this energy source that's kind of they're plugging into. And I tend to think of purpose as spiritual DNA. It's always been there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a physical DNA. And I think the physical and the spiritual they sort of coexist. And so a lot of times what we can find in the physical, there's something going on in the spirit. And so this is sort of the spiritual DNA is what purpose is. It's there. You were born with it. It's in you. And how it is revealed or how you discover it. And a lot of times the way it's revealed and discovered is through adversity, to bring us right back to where I was at the beginning.
Right.
We go through tough shift events that forge us to dig deep to find our metal.
Yeah. Very powerful.
Yeah. So you can see if that interviewer or interviewer is sort of a vision, a little capstone vision thing that you could play with at this. And again,
Yeah.
purpose doesn't change because it's spiritual DNA. Vision, however, there's new chapters that come around. There's new vistas. Every time you hit one vista, you see another vista that's out there, and you're drawn towards it. So it's the movement that we're about in that regard.
I've been thinking a lot about retirement in the past week or two. I read a really good article about it somewhere. I can't remember. I read so much, but and many people who get to retirement, they kind of unplug from their purpose or their meaning. I mean, my meaning is my job,
Mm-hmm.
and not a lot of people go, okay, well, and if you have a purpose, if you're clear on your purpose like this, it's going to make your retirement easier because you can do projects and do things, all kinds of things, from volunteer work to a podcast to God knows what, where you might not be working as hard, but that you can be fulfilled in your retirement. You feel that you have a purpose. Because a lot of people, they retire and it's like purpose is gone. The purpose was to do a good job for the company and do the projects and get recognition and all of that. A lot of people die quite close to retirement because they just don't feel they have any meaning in their life anymore. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I mean, I learned many years ago the most dangerous time in a person's life is when they're born and when they retire. Because a lot of times that lack of what they think of it, they define as meaning, is really their missions. Their missions become what's going on. And so a lot of this ties back to identity. I like to think of your purpose as the words around your identity. It's kind of like a name that you have, almost like the Indians have, spirit cloud or something like that, or they have
right. Walking with buffaloes.
Yeah. So it's almost like that in a way that it gives you this sort of deep connection and identity. And one of the things I think that gets really confused for people is, in many cases you ask, well, tell me about you, or who are you? And say, well, I'm a business consultant, or I'm a lawyer, or I'm a doctor, or I'm a school teacher. And then our work is our identity. But in fact, those are identifiers. And I think one of the big challenges we have in today's world that's really been difficult is this confusion between identifiers and identity, because we have gender identity, we have racial identity, we have political party identity, we have status identity, what brands you wear. These are all false forms of identity, where when you can, but they're identifiers. So you can see, like behind me is my Pittsburgh Steelers terrible towel, right? So I grew up in Pittsburgh, so I identify as a Pittsburgh Steeler fan, which may tick off 31% of the 31 other cities that people are watching from. But if my Steelers win or lose, so what? It's not my identity. It's my team lost. So my identity is not at risk of that. And the powerful part is when you're able to separate the identifiers from the identity, then whether your candidate wins or loses, it's okay. You're okay. And because you know who you are, and you're not dependent upon that being like I've been personally robbed or attacked or vilified or whatever. And so unfortunately we have a lot of personal attacks that go on and it's attacking people's identity the way I'm using it.
Yeah.
And it's to me, that's probably one of the most pervasive and destructive forces in our current society that's going on right now is
no kidding.
Identity issues.
Yeah. So I've been following politics pretty intensely for a long time, perhaps too intensely. I read a lot. I look at a lot of stuff. This interview now, after when people see this interview, the election will have been over and we'll see what happens. But I'm often thinking, well, what will I feel like and be like if Kamala wins? How will I feel like and be like if Trump wins?
Mm-hmm.
And they're very different worlds we'll be in a certain sense. But I keep saying, no matter who wins, I'll still be myself.
Yeah.
I'll still be here in the moment with my capabilities. Now I'll do different things depending on who wins. And it will be a kind of a shock if a certain person wins. And anyway, but we often sort of outsource our identity to to a political party, right?
Yeah,
Or a job, obviously, like I'm a doctor, as
right.
opposed to I'm a ditch digger. And
Right.
there, you know,
Yeah, and when that happens, basically what we're doing is we're creating false idols.
yeah.
We're worshiping these idols as opposed to understanding that sort of the universe has given us, or the higher power has given us, this identity. And the more that we can explore that identity, the less that other stuff bothers us, the more secure we get in that. It's almost like, remember years ago, the kids would say, talk to the hand. It's kind of like that. I'm not going to say you ever get bulletproof from it, but you get far less, where it's far less disturbing, because you are comfortable within your skin.
And it seems to me this must be somewhat of a rarity, though. I mean, something I thought years ago, I thought, okay, we have two football teams, and we have two groups of people that watch the football teams.
Mm-hmm.
And or baseball. Let's talk about baseball, because the Dodgers just won the pennant,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone thought the New York Yankees were going to win, but the Dodgers won. So what we have is everybody in Los Angeles is happy, and everybody in New York is sad.
Mm-hmm.
Because some external thing happened that really doesn't have a lot of impact directly on our life, except through our identity. I identify with my team, and if they lose, I feel sad. Now, that's okay in a transitory kind of way. It's like, yeah, we want our team to win.
Obviously, I mean,
But
there's nothing wrong with having loyalties.
yeah, yeah. But it's when that becomes so, when the identification in anything becomes deeper, it's like you'll be depressed for months because New York didn't win,
Right.
or whatever it is, and that always seems silly to me. I mean, what really changed for me? Nothing much. It's like, damn, the Niners are not are. I watched my one Niner game of the year. I used to watch a lot, and they won, and it was great. And now they lost, and now they won again, and
Right.
I just can't get wrapped up in that. But I love watching a good football game because it's fun in the moment.
Yeah,
It's a
absolutely.
different thing.
Absolutely. And I think that's, at some level, the way that you're able to detach from the football or the baseball game is a healthy detachment. Yeah, you would have loved to have seen your team won. Would it have made a big difference to you? Not necessarily, but it's kind of cool. You get a little bragging rights for a little bit. You can jab a few people with some fun and some barbs
Yeah.
here and there.
Well, it's almost as if I won. As I have nothing to do with influencing anything in that football game, obviously. But we won. We won.
Actually, you influenced it with the Nielsen ratings, which helped pay all those players and helped pay all those people that were in the cameraman and pay for all those other sorts of things as you were watching all those ads. But
Yeah.
that's the reason. As to what happened on the field, you had nothing to do with it.
But we also have this issue around something bigger, which is nationalism. I'm an American, and of course, America is the best country, in many people's opinion.
Right.
According to the financial, the economy right now, America is doing better than any other country right now. The stock market, the job growth, everything is great, which is good, I guess. But I was thinking this morning, we talked about the gross national product, but there's a country, maybe you know it. There's a country that measures their gross national happiness. Have you heard of that?
I have not heard of that. Which country is that?
Well, it's a little country called Bhutan in the Himalayas.
Wow.
And it's a Buddhist-oriented country, which is if you're following the real tenets of Buddhism, you're focused more on happiness than on conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Not that everyone is.
Right.
But I wondered, how could, you can't tell the gross national happiness by any external statistics. You could only get it from massively interviewing a lot of people on certain criteria. But I wouldn't bet that America is the happiest country. We've
No,
got a lot. We should be the happiest country,
if materialism is the measure, yeah, in that sense. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of interesting because tying it back to the business consulting work in this book I have, The Chief Leadership Officer, I talk about the triple bottom line. Now, there's a lot of people that talk about a triple bottom line, which has the environment in it. But I basically, my triple bottom line is how is your purpose, how are your people, and how is your profits. So those are my three triple bottom lines that I work with business owners on, in terms of understanding that if you are measuring these three factors, and there's ways to measure profit. Obviously is easy. People, you can measure the culture in terms of how well the culture is. I mean, I have some real simple tools that can do some, and there's obviously very sophisticated tools for that as well. I mean, Gallup is a leader in sort of organizational culture measurement. And then the purpose piece is one where you can measure that by, again, surveying people and asking them, things like, does your work, do you see how your work makes a difference? Do you feel meaningful at work? Do you feel heard? Do you feel like you have a place here? Because ultimately this equation, the purpose of the person aligned with the purpose of the organization, what it's really measuring at some level is, do you feel significant and do you belong, which are two deep psychological needs. And so if you ask questions around significance and belonging, or contribution is another way of looking at significance, does your work make a difference? You can actually measure the purpose, the effectiveness of the purpose of the organization in terms of what's going on. So that's why I have this triple bottom line that I try to instill in my clients.
So have you found in your studies and working with people, if the people side is doing well, people are getting along, people are cooperating, people are working for the company, people feel they're being taken care of, does that generally impact the profits of the company?
It does, and actually, I didn't do the empirical research, but if you remember the book that Jim Collins wrote called Good to Great, basically when I read that book, I was like, well, this is the research for all the work I've been doing all these years. And basically he lays out in the book, now he calls them visionary companies. I would call them an on-purpose business or an on-purpose company. Where he's just at the vision piece. He doesn't have the purpose piece in there. But in essence, the empirical data that he has gathered, which shows when an organization is healthy, which generally means the people are healthy, the organizations outperform those that are just using, let's call it carrot and stick measures, for lack of better words, or carrot and stick methods of management. That's why I'm sort of a big, the Chief Leadership Officer book that I have is I describe it as a book that is that looks at the CEO system under which we have all grown up. I mean, but I don't know if you know this, but before 1950, there were no CEOs.
Really?
CEOs, they were presidents. Presidents were usually people that were sort of brought up through the business. Again, if you go back historically, the first business schools in the United States occurred in the late 1890s and the early 1900s. And that was Tuck School at Dartmouth, Wharton, and Harvard. And all three of those had a guy who, by the name of Frederick Taylor. In fact, I have his book here. Frederick Taylor wrote a book called The Principles of Scientific Management. And Frederick Taylor is best known. You'll probably, once I say this, you'll understand. You'll remember who he is. He's the guy that did time motion studies in steel mills to say, what can we do to create efficiency? And he had a dramatic impact on the separation of work. Before that you had guilds and everybody learned everything. So you had apprentices and you had masters and you had these different levels of things, and people would learn everything. But as the Industrial Revolution started to come along, and they started just dividing work. Well, this is the guy that said, okay, we're going to divide the work, but we're going to make it really efficient. Because if I have a 100-pound guy with a coal shovel shoveling that into a blast furnace versus a 200-pound big strong guy, that big 200-pound strong guy can get it in there faster. And
Sure.
I can also get him a bigger shovel, and I can train him on better technique so he can work even faster. So that's kind of, the time motion studies. And so this is the guy that created industrial engineering, training and development, and consulting.
Wow.
So he's really an influential person, brilliant guy. He was unfortunately, if you read the book, you'll read into it that he was very very typical in some regard of the attitude of the workers are. It's why we call them human resources. He objectified. That's the right word that I'm looking for. He
Sure.
objectified the workers, and why today we call them human resources. Okay, sure. As opposed to people, because they were part of the resources that went into the production capacity that we have.
So there's a certain truth to that, obviously.
Correct.
However,
they are real people.
Yeah.
And so you have this whole generation of management. And in the 1950s, with these business schools that came around that taught management, I mean, I have a master's of business administration, not a master's of business leadership. So it's the sort of thing where you have this history of people coming along, and they matured. And what happened is these companies were starting to, in the 50s, companies were starting to merge. And what they needed was, and they were diverse companies. You could look at like a Ford Motor Company that now has a mining operation because they need steel, and they have a steel mill because they need them for their cars, and they have an electronics company. So they're diversifying, and now they need somebody who's going to oversee this diversified amalgamation or conglomerate. And that was the birth of a CEO. So it's always funny to me whenever I get, some guy comes to my house and he wants to cut the trees or something, and he hands me his card and it says Bill Smith, and it says on his truck, Bill Smith, CEO. It's just such a misnomer. But anyway, so we have this history of management that has come along, and so the CLO book, the Chief Leadership Officer book, is basically saying, look, that methodology, while it's still important, I'm not dishing it. Okay, that business sciences are still really important, but they're increasingly obsolete and dangerous to human beings. So what people would sooner be, because CEOs are chief executive officers who execute, CLOs are chief leadership officers who lead. So people would sooner be led than executed.
That's a good way to put it.
And so at some level, what you have going on is you have this very, we are fish in water who don't realize we're in water. And our ability to come out of that water and look at the situation and say, whoa, is there a better way of doing this? And again, I'm a capitalist. I'm a believer in business and what it can do. I believe business has lost its way in many ways. Obviously, I'm a reformer in that sense, but the idea here is what I call commonwealth capitalism, where commonwealth means that all ships rise. That's what business should be about, is commonwealth capitalism. So it's this idea here that we have an opportunity to begin to say, let's take the best of what they have, but let's add this other dimension of leadership, which is actually largely meaning. So I basically, when I talk to CEOs, I say, look, it's not that you're doing business wrong. You're just doing business incompletely right.
Right.
There's a dimension that's missing. And if you add this leadership dimension, and mind you, that's the messy part. The people part are the messy part. And that's where I think why people like you and me, actually, if you listen to football head coaches talk about their players, you can learn a whole lot about leadership or not. Okay. I mean, it's interesting. I have a friend of mine who's a professional football player, and I asked him one time, who's the best coach you ever had? And he said, I had one coach. He said, well, what are you asking me? And I said, well, who's the best coach? And he said, well, I had one coach that drove us by fear. And we got results, but we hated him.
Yeah.
It was not a good situation. And he said it was not a fun place to play.
Yeah.
I had another coach who understood us, and we'd die for that guy. We'd go to the mats for that guy.
Right.
And
right.
we won with him. He said, so, it's two different styles. It's just, you can get results. He said, but, for me, I couldn't wait to get off of this team, and I couldn't wait to be on that team. And
Right.
So what it's really saying is if you're that team, you're going to draw the talent that wants to be over here because they know they may be a professional football player who weighs 250 pounds and has a 5% body fat, but they're also a human being with feelings.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah. So anyway, those are the sort of things that we sort of look at with this.
So, Kevin, I'd like to shift a little bit and look at one more thing for the last part of the interview. Purpose in relationships. And, if a couple come together and their purpose is aligned, it's probably going to be a more
harmonious marriage.
And if they're not, so do you have any recommendations regarding your online tool, your On Purpose tool, where the husband does it, the wife does it, and then they explore that together? I mean, that's not something I've ever done in my marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems that it might be valuable. Any experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where I'm going to lean on somebody taught me this a long time ago. And that is, if you think about a marriage as a triangle, and that here he is and here she is, and that this triangle merges and it becomes something called a marriage, that this
Right.
individual and that individual are still the individuals, but the strength of this. So you have alignment between these people, but this is the organizational part. Almost as if you were to turn my thing on this way, that it's the purpose of the person aligned with the organization. And that when these people come together, no different than going to work for a job, although it's far more serious, mind you, because this is your mate.
The wife, yeah.
Yeah, you can quit a job. You can quit a marriage too, but I'm just saying that's not the intent that most people go into it. Or a partnership, however that may be. The idea here is that it's a separate entity. It's a third entity.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
when you understand that it's a third entity, then what's going on is you can almost turn it up and say, from the marriage, my job is to uplift my wife to be the most on-purpose person she can be. Her job is to uplift me, so I'm the most on-purpose person I can be. And therefore, in doing that, and again, I'm the one that says you could actually create a separate purpose statement for your marriage because it's a different organization, and you're going to have a different purpose, vision, mission, and values for that. So that would be sort of the ultimate strategic advice I would give. Now, I'm not a counselor. There's all sorts of other issues that get complicated, finances and all that get into it, as well as one of my. I don't remember the name of the movie, but it has Meg Ryan and I think Tom Hanks. Is it Tom Hanks? Maybe not. Anyway, there's a scene where they're in bed, and gosh, I wish I could remember the name. Anyway, there's a scene where they're in bed and he says something to her and she responds, but then they pan back and her parents are in bed on this side, and his parents are in bed on that side. And what's going on is the parents are having a conversation through their respective children. And so at some level, what happens is we bring in our parents into the marriage. And until we understand that,
right.
that we are arguing, our respective parents are arguing, not us. And once we understand that, then we can begin to say, well, we can close that out and we create our marriage, type of thing. This is a funny scene in the movie.
It's not When Harry Met Sally, is it?
No, it's not that. It's something like I wish I could. I don't remember the name. I'll butcher it. So,
but it's Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. I'll look that up.
I think it is.
That
I can
sounds...
wrong whether it's Tom Hanks but anyway, it's a funny movie, and it might even be Bruce Willis. Actually, now that I think about it, could be Bruce Willis, and so look it up and see.
Okay.
Yeah, it's something like Being There, not Being There. That was the Peter Sellers movie.
Yeah.
It has sort of a romantic title to it.
Right.
Anyway.
Sounds great. Well, I can see that if I can see my wife's purpose and she can see my purpose and really get it, then we can support that person in that way.
Yes. It also sheds light. For instance, my wife's purpose statement is revealing truth. And all I can tell you is that for her, truth is a huge issue. So when she sees that in a movie or in a person or whatever is going on, it is extraordinarily disturbing for her. I have insight on that. That's a very valuable insight to have. Again, I learned my lessons early on about telling the truth, that it's really important to tell the truth. So it's probably why we have a good marriage, because we tell the truth with each other and we don't play dishonest games. That's probably why we've got 40 years of marriage. That's a happy marriage. But there are also times where she can be such a truth detector that it can get her wound up in knots. And so as a result, part of what we were able to communicate on is, Judith, that's your truth detector going off right now. And I understand, but what does that have to do with us right now? So let go of that for now. And, and so these are the ways that deep heart understanding can be very helpful in the relationship.
Very good.
Yeah.
So, I wasn't sure at first, but I'm feeling more confident now to recommend your On Purpose process. So what's the website for that?
It's onpurpose.me.
Okay, great. And I'll have a link to it below here.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you also have a website for your business?
Well, onpurpose.com is the business website.
Oh, okay. There it is.
Yeah, we have that as well. So
yeah, I'll have that below.
Thank you.
So this was a really fun conversation with me, Kevin.
It's good to connect. I mean, this is the sort of thing where I think I appreciate what you're doing. I mean, I've watched some of your interviews, and now I'm going to call them interviews. But anyway, I think it's awesome what you're doing, and congratulations, because retirement is just a word.
Yeah, really.
It's a new chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, in fact, in the On Purpose Person, I have a chapter. What's fascinating about the book, because the man meets characters along the way. The first character he meets is a high school senior. One of the characters he meets later on in the book is a retired businessman. And there's people in between, just different walks of life, from a housewife to a pastor to a tennis player, a high-level tennis player. You have all these different people that are out there. And the point is that you can be on purpose all the way to your grave. That's the part of it, where a lot of people think I hear women say my purpose left when my children went away to college, and I'm an empty nester now. It's not. No, you've been freed up. I lost my job. No, you've been freed up. So that's in retirement. I've retired. Well, I've been freed up. If they've left a corporate life, I'm like you. You're probably never going to retire. You're always going to be doing something that is meaningful to you, that you want to put out into the world because you've got the systems and the know-how and the wisdom to be able to do it.
Yeah. Well, we shall see.
Yeah. Anyway.
So thank you very, very much for this interview.
Thank you as well for having me. I appreciate the opportunity, and keep up the great work, and be on purpose because you are bringing light.
Thank you. Thank you very much.